evidence that we probably don't. And even these heroes of the faith that we've been reading about in Hebrews didn't always get it right. I want to give you a few short stories. How many of you like stories? Yeah. That's that little kid part of us that we never grow out of. We still like people to tell us stories. And so when the writer of Hebrews mentions people like Gideon, Barak, Samson, Rahab, Jephthah, we're kind of going, yeah, okay, whatever. That's not a story. Well, let me give you, as Paul Harvey used to say, for those of you that are old enough, the rest of the story. You know Gideon? You know the story of Gideon? Gideon was this cowering little man who had natural leadership ability. I know that seems very contrary to one another. He was a natural-born leader, except he really doubted his own strengths, his own talents, his own abilities. Anybody ever been there? Thought you were far less than what you really are? Gideon gets this call from God to be God's general. Wants him to go out and defeat the Midianites who are oppressing all the people of God. Somebody needed to do it. God tapped Gideon on the shoulder. Said, "You're the one." Gideon says, "No, you're wrong. That's not me." "Yeah, that's you. You're the one." "Well, God, if this is really true, then I need a sign." Okay, how many of you are gutsy enough to do that? God comes out of the sky, speaks in a large voice, "Gideon." And you're saying, "Yes, Lord, but I still need a sign." Now here's how insecure Gideon was. He didn't need one sign. He didn't need two signs. He needed 3 signs. If you thought it was gutsy to ask God for a sign, imagine what it's like to go back the third time. "Well, Lord, third time's the charm. Give me one more." But he did. In the end, Gideon wins the battles that God sets out for him. In the end, he becomes one of these heroes of faith because eventually he does do what God wants him to do. But Gideon's problems didn't stop there. Like the soil, like the sunshine, like the seasons that we mentioned earlier, Gideon was very prolific. 70 kids. Okay, if you've got 1, you think that's hard. If you've got 3, you think that's hard. If you've got more, you think that's hard. Try 70. One of his kids, Abimelech, anybody remember that name? He was the take charge guy in the family. Later on, because of some of Gideon's qualities, his son Abimelech, who was actually just born to a concubine, not to his wife, decided that the only way to seize power was to kill off 69 others. Okay, do the math. There's 70. He wants to kill off 69. The rest of them can live, meaning him. Why would God choose a man like Gideon? He seems to have so many character flaws. He seems to have so many insecurities. He seems to have so many things that are going wrong in his life. And yet, Hebrews says, here's a hero of the faith. People that God chose, and they acted in faith. Gideon. Okay, I had a little bit of hope that you'd heard of Gideon. It's diminishing as I ask you, have you heard of Barak? Well, he's mentioned, but he's probably even more obscure. He too was a warrior. He was a judge he too had some character flaws. Couldn't quite put his trust in God completely. He led the armies around the time of Deborah. And Deborah, who is acting as a judge, taps him on the shoulder and says, Barak, I need you to go into battle, and I need you to defeat the enemy, and I need you to do this in the name of the Lord. Wow, what an honor, right? And Barak's response is, only if you come too. Now, that wasn't to get Deborah out in the front lines. She had already proven herself as a great warrior. Think of Xena, if you will, from the old television show. This is Deborah. And what Barak is saying in all of this is, okay, I know that you're telling me that God is tapping me on the shoulder. I know you're telling me that God wants me to do this great thing. But quite honestly, in Deborah, we trust. And so he is convinced that the only way they're going to win this battle is if Deborah comes. Now, Deborah gives him a prophetic word. She says, you know what? You're going to win this battle. You're going to become the great hero that God wants you to be, but you're not going to get credit for any of it. A woman is going to get credit, and it's not me. Well, as it happens, and I'm not going to go into all the messiness of the battle and how it was won and how the king died at the hands of a woman who drove a tent stake through his head. And she is the one credited with winning the entire battle, even though it was Barak who slew the enemy. Here's a man with a lot of character issues, isn't it? A lot of trust issues. Doesn't seem to be a man with a really deep faith. And yet, here he is, listed in Hebrews as one of the heroes of faith. One of God's own choosing. One of the people that he's raising up. Okay, here's an easier one. Samson. How many have heard of Samson? Don't confuse him with Hercules. Different guy. Different religion. Samson was born really out of the prayers of his parents. And they dedicated him to a very pure, very honorable, very separated for God kind of way. He became what was known as a Nazarite. Not Nazarene, Nazarite. No alcohol. No connection with dead bodies. No unclean things could come into his life. He couldn't cut his hair. Okay, and when I was 18, that was a good thing. Didn't cut my hair for years. Could have been a Nazarite. Just missed it. The only problem with Samson is he liked to squander all of these gifts of God on his own self-indulgent ways. God gave Samson everything. Made him a judge, which is kind of like a king. And yet, Samson didn't honor God by honoring his vows, honoring his Nazarite ways. What he did was he used that always to his own advantage, for his own amusement. Setting fire to fields, slaying enemies that he didn't need to. And finally giving himself over to one of the women who was enemy. The only vow he didn't break right away was the one about cutting his hair. Something about guys and hair. I don't know. That one he kept for a while. Eventually, though, he even gave in that secret. They cut his hair and his strength was all gone. Said he had the strength of 30 men.